when I started my business, I was 24, and somebody said to me, "You really need to get out and network." And I was like, "Oh, okay. What's that then? What's networking?" And they said, "Well, you kind of need to go into meetings and meet a load of people that you don't know." And I thought, well, that sounds terrifying, doesn't it? Like, the concept of that sounds horrendous. Are they all just going to give me work? I mean, why are we doing this?
This episode is brought to you by BackLooper. If you're tired of learning about guest complaints from online reviews, listen to this. It's time to protect your reputation while still getting valuable data so you can make enhancements to your guest experience. Using the most effective ways to generate responses, combined with intuitive reporting that quickly points out the largest issues, BackLooper enables you to strengthen your operations with superior guest experience intelligence that leads to higher satisfaction. Now more than ever, we need to bring our guests into the conversation so they can be a part of our industry's success. Get started today with no minimum commitment by visiting backlooper.com or email me directly at josh@backlooper.com. Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman, founder of BackLooper. I help attractions collect guest feedback and identify top priorities needed for improvement.
And I'm Matt Heller, founder of Performance Optimist Consulting. I help leaders lead so they can increase employee engagement and retention.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros podcast.
Hey, Matt, how's it going?
It's going really well, Josh. How about yourself?
I'm doing really well. Really excited for our guest today. We are going across the pond once again. I know we've had several people from over in the UK and from all over the world, and that's really what I love about the Attraction Pros podcast. It's so global.
It is. And I'm really excited to talk to Kelly Molson, who is the co-founder of Rubber Cheese and also the Skip the Cue podcast. I kind of feel like I know her already, even before talking to her, just because I've been listening to her podcast. And so it's really great to kind of put her on the other side of the microphone and see what she has to say as a guest.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, for those listening or for those watching, definitely add Skip the Cue to your podcast library right alongside with Attraction Pros. She does great interviews. She's had a lot of phenomenal guests. She covers a lot of great content. And what's really cool is we're going to be able to talk about the digital experience of the visitor attractions industry. And one of the things that I find really fascinating about this is how it is so interconnected with every other aspect of the business, and how your website truly reflects your brand, and that the user experience is just so critical to not just, getting people in the door, but getting people to really understand what, who it is that you are and who it is that you are serving, and being able to stay up to date with the latest trends in web development. Rubber Cheese has been around for 18 years now, which, as far as I'm concerned, is that like the internet was still pretty brand new back then. Not totally, but right. There's definitely, if you look at websites from 2002 or just the early 2000s, there's obviously it's great to see how far we've come just in that time, and being able to stay up to date with the current trends across that time, but also throughout COVID as well. That specifically in the attractions industry, the amount of changes in policies and procedures and logistics has changed, not only on site, but how that is all reflected online as well. So it'll be great to talk to Kelly about all of this.
I agree. And the other thing that I think is really fascinating is she's got a couple of stories, call them case studies, if you will, about how creating a certain digital user experience actually, increased revenue, right? It wasn't just about awareness of your business that people think about for a website, but it increased revenue and it increased bookings. Another scenario, decreased labor hours. Right. So I think that's really fascinating when it comes to, the overall impact that this digital experience can have on your business. Again, it's not just an awareness of, hey, here are our hours, here are our prices, but it can really have a deep impact on the business.
Right, absolutely. And I think that that's so unique, really, for both of us, coming at it from the guest experience side and the employee experience side, now bringing in the digital experience, and that it's all cohesive. It's all one large experience for, for everyone involved.
Absolutely. So with that, should we go ahead and get to this interview with Kelly Molson?
Let's do it. The Chief Cheese. Kelly Molson, co-founder of Rubber Cheese and Skip the Queue podcast. Welcome to the AttractionPros podcast. We're so glad to have you here today. How are you, Kelly?
Oh, I'm really good. That was such a spectacular introduction as well. I have to say, Josh, you've got the best accent for podcasts. So much better than mine.
He has got a voice for radio, no doubt about it.
Oh, I mean, I don't want to knock his face. He's a handsome chap, but the voice is, yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. I try to leverage the announcer voice whenever I can. Sometimes I can go a little overboard, but try to find that balance. But we're so glad to have you here on the podcast. We're really excited to learn about Rubber Cheese and to talk about Skip the Queue. But first, we just want to learn a few quick things. So, cats or dogs?
Oh, dogs. 100%. I've got two here right now.
And Kelly, what's something you're not good at?
Oh, you've been listening to my podcast. Oh God, I'm really bad at any sport that has like hand-eye coordination. So things like I'm terrible at pool. I'm terrible at darts. Like I would be, I used to play netball, but I was a defender. So I would be really terrible at basketball, like those kind of, rubbish.
So axe throwing probably shouldn't be something you try?
Would not trust me with that, Matt, no.
Don't go axe throwing with Kelly. And then one last one just for fun. Who's your favorite Beatle?
Oh, good question. I'd probably say Paul. But I would probably say Paul because when I was really young, I think one of the first like records that I was bought, or I might have bought with my pocket money, was the Frog Song by Paul McCartney. So, which is doing the Beatles a complete injustice. I know I do really like the Beatles, but that's probably why Paul, because of the Frog Song. Sorry,
very
Paul.
nice. I feel like Paul is a lot of people's favorite answer, but I feel like it's not for the reason that you gave. So I appreciate the uniqueness of that response.
You're welcome.
All right. So now that that's out of the way, really appreciate that quick rapid fire question right there. Kelly, tell us a little bit about Rubber Cheese.
Gosh, so Rubber Cheese is a web design and development agency that I co-founded 18 years ago, which I have to say is the longest job that I've ever had in my entire career. I feel quite ancient. So Paul and I, we met working at an e-commerce company nearly 20 years ago. And the two of us I think we were just we wanted to do something for ourselves and decided that we were going to set up our own agency. And I'll tell you about the name a little bit later. So Rubber Cheese came to life, but we were both quite young, in all honesty. So we were 24 and had we'd been working for a while and we had experience of working in an agency, but we hadn't really anticipated what a very large uphill challenge it was going to be to learn all the things that you needed to do to run a business at that point. I was a designer. Paul was a designer, but I was very much focused on branding and print-based and marketing design, and Paul was a web designer. So we had really quite complementary skills. And so, 18 years ago, we set it up and it was just the two of us. And then we grew very gradually over time. But now we work with global and national clients in the visitor attraction sector, but also some in food and drink as well. So there's a few little crossovers there. I can tell you how that came about a little bit later as well. But we essentially build incredible websites that give visitor attractions and their users a really incredible experience. And that can be anything from a ticket booking platform for a National Children's Museum, or it can be a ticket booking system for a visitor centre. Like we work with a number of distillery tours, which is very different from a theme park attraction, but it's still a very experience led. And that's something that works really well with our team as well, because we're all very much in that mindset of spending money on experiences rather than spending money on things. And so tourism and attractions is a really great sector for us to be in. So yeah, essentially that's what we do. We build really great websites for really great venues.
Okay, and now you got to tell us why rubber cheese.
I wish it would. I hope this isn't too boring for you, because I think there's a real expectation that there's going to be a really incredible story behind it. But so Paul and I were both working together at the same time for another company, and this is 20 years ago. So this is quite retro. Do you remember Flash animation? Do you remember that, where all the websites were all like animated? So that was like brand new then, and we were teaching ourselves how to use it. And we set up a training website, and we said, we need a domain name. We need to call this something. And Paul said, let's just call it Rubber Cheese. So, oh, right, that'll do. And so we bought the domain name and we used it as our training thing. And then when we set up our own company, we said, well, what are we going to call it? And he said, we'll just call it Rubber Cheese. Great, right? And we're like, yeah, of course. So there was no meaning behind it. And this is terrible, because obviously in the industry that I work in, brand and name and positioning is everything. But we were like, yeah, that would do. That's fine. It was why on your last episode, I was really laughing along to the flying squirrel and the pink, because I was thinking back to our story and going, yeah, well, this is kind of the same, right? We took nobody's advice whatsoever. But what we did do is, well, I'll tell you what it did. The name is a bit stupid and it's fine. And you either kind of love it or hate it, right? So it's probably a bit of a funnel in terms of, do people want to work with us? What are they going to be like to work with? Well, we're really good at what we do, but we're also, really great, fun people to work with. And hopefully that kind of comes across a bit. But then it's quite memorable. So I can remember years ago going into, the bank, and I'd pay in a check, and they'd say, oh, Rubber Cheese, what's that? And then they'd start this conversation. So it was kind of like, it was quite nice that people wanted to find out what you did. I'd go to a networking event and someone would come up and say, do you know what? I've been waiting for you to get here because I saw Rubber Cheese on the form and I really wanted to find out what you do. So if anything, it's been quite a conversation starter, and it makes people a bit inquisitive. But about, oh gosh, how long ago is this now? Probably about 6 or 7 years ago, we decided that we did need a story, because we get asked all the time. And we had a connection to a brilliant illustrator called John Bergerman. We really love his work. And we asked him, if we ran a competition for people to submit a story, would you illustrate it for us as a prize? Which he very kindly did. When we have a copy of the illustration in our studio. But essentially we asked our kind of fans, social media people that follow us, if they would like to submit a story to the competition. So we ran this competition, and then the story that won, you can find it on our website. But it's a brilliant story that one of our clients at the time actually wrote for us. And so Rubber Cheese is all around, it's an old World War II legend about innovation and creativity. So if you have a little look on our website, you'll be able to find that story.
Cool.
So cool that it was user generated, right? It wasn't something you came up with in a boardroom, right? That's very cool.
Yeah, it's nice. And look, it's fun, but it kind of fits what we do. And it was just nice to get everybody kind of involved in that story as well. Sure.
I like how you said that, you kind of disregarded the advice of, brand strategists, even though that is what you do. But if you really think about it, kind of by breaking those rules that, you said to all the engagement people coming up to you, at conferences, or even just going to the bank, that it immediately sparks conversation and has that recognition, versus if you went with something very traditional that said exactly what you did, Kelly and Paul's web design solutions, and then this, it would have that boring name that wouldn't be as memorable as Rubber Cheese. So,
yeah, I do. And look, I've got many friends that are brand strategists, and I'm just going to put it out there that you should definitely listen to them. But
right.
just for the for the name and how it all worked out for us, it worked out pretty well.
Right. So 18 years in web design and web development, and the internet has changed quite a bit since that time. You're talking about Flash animation, and that was the hottest thing, right?
Yeah.
That was the pinnacle of web design. Look, it's a moving picture. Look, what we can do with it.
Yeah.
How have you been keeping up with the changing standard for web design? I feel like user experience today is now so critical, so important, and people are either doing it really well and really right, or it could be a very clunky experience with a lot of friction. So how have you and Rubber Cheese been able to meet up with just the rapid pace evolution?
Well, it's like everything, isn't it? Everything moves so swiftly now. I'm sure in your industry, what the two of you do, things move so rapidly that you're always continuously, feels like you're kind of running to catch up with yourself all the time. But I guess, like most people, we keep ourselves up to date on trends. We keep ourselves, we go to conferences, we attend webinars, so we're constantly educating ourselves on what's changing, even down to things in the UK. So at the moment there are new laws are being introduced at the end of September around accessibility for websites. So we find out about these things well in advance, we educate ourselves, we understand what we need to do for our clients, but we are quite lucky, I think, I think the attractions sector as a whole is very open, and there is a lot of really key key kind of conferences that take place. So we make sure that we are at those conferences, we're listening to what people are sharing with us, but we also have a lot of peer-to-peer support as well. I guess back in the day when we started, agency world was very competitive. And so when we were kind of learning and understanding about things, there was a real kind of hesitancy for other agencies to speak to us because they felt, we might be trying to steal their clients or vice versa. But that's changed hugely, especially in the last few years. So we're really lucky that we're a member of a couple of agency collectives. So one is actually called the Agency Collective, and one is called Agencynomics. And they're full of other agency owners like us in various specialisms. So some might be web, some might be print-based and branding, but we all learn from each other. And so actually during lockdown in the UK, they have been our kind of key source of what's happening in terms of the world, what's happening in industry, what's happening in business, but also, what kind of new things are happening in the sectors that we're working in and in web design itself. So I think it's having that mindset of always being learning, constantly learning. You can always improve, you can always be better. But you've got to be motivated to do that. And luckily we are, and all of our team members are as well. So yeah, loads of learning.
Loads of learning, yeah. And I would imagine, especially right now, we're recording this in 2020, and there's been some learning over the last 5 or 6 months as far as what's happening with COVID. So I'm curious, from a design standpoint, from an online presence standpoint, what sort of questions are you getting from your clients about things that they need to change or update or include now that pretty much everything is online?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing in the UK is that with attractions that are opening, everything has to be booked in advance, which is not always the case at some attractions. So, for example, we work with Eureka, the National Children's Museum, who are just absolutely fabulous. It's a brilliant venue full of brilliant people. They, like many of, like all of the attractions in the UK, were forced to close in March and have recently opened. So they opened at the beginning of August. Now, before they could open, they had to have a system in place that would allow people to book time slots. So people could always book in advance. We built their website so that people could book tickets in advance and also come for walk-ups. But we've had to change and implement something new so that people can now book a time slot. So it's not just they have to book in advance, they have to book a time that they can come as well. So really that's been the biggest change in the past few months. And I guess for us, the biggest thing has been, how do we manage that influx of kind of requests and changing requirements from our clients as well? Because in the UK, we were very much led by what the government was telling us we could do. And you might find out on a Friday that you could then do something, and then you'd want to implement it the next week. And it would mean, okay, we've now got all of these things that we need to do. How do we fit that in? Because we've got many clients in this sector. We can't prioritize one or another over each other. So it's been a challenge. Yeah, it's been very, very full on, but we're really lucky. We've been able to be open and work all this time, and obviously a lot of our clients haven't. So we know that we're speaking from quite a privileged position as well.
What was it like kind of, I would say, towards the beginning of lockdown, and kind of the, we talked about the evolution of just standards of web development and UX, and then now we're talking about things like time ticketing and reserved entry, where a lot of that was very much up in the air. And so what did that look like for you and your team, maybe kind of balancing trying to absorb a lot of information and react to it, while at the same time being proactive and advising your clients, saying, these are the trends that we're now seeing. So we talk about timed entry. You've always had the ability to buy tickets in advance or buy for a specific day, but now we need to get more granular, and now it needs to be a specific time, where vast majority of attractions, the most types of attractions, didn't have that in place. So what all did that look like from you and your team back, March through today of 2020?
It looked like, yeah, it's like you say, actually, it still is changing. We still are finding it quite difficult to plan very far ahead, because we know that on a weekly basis, something might change again. I had a week off last week, and I've come back to the announcement that now only six people can meet in groups outside, and only 2 families from, every week something happens where you think that's going to have an impact on those things. Going back to when it first happened, it was completely and utterly overwhelming. That was the one, way that I can explain how everybody was feeling. But I think what we tried to do is just do anything that we could that would be helpful. So I can remember the weekend of lockdown when it was announced, sitting down and thinking, oh gosh, so how, what do we do to help our clients? What are we going to be able to do? And so I started to pull together a blog. It was a really simple blog of resource that was being pushed out by people. And I thought, well, if that's one thing that I can do to help, just collate anything that I'm finding that would be useful to our clients, useful to prospective clients, just collate it in one place. So I started to do that and push that out to people. It's funny, we have an ebook, and we were about 2/3 of the way through kind of releasing our ebook. So we were releasing it in chapters, and that first week of lockdown, I said to Paul, we need to get all of this out now. We were kind of doing it, we were drip feeding it, because we hadn't finished designing the last few chapters. So we were doing it to kind of delay it for us. So we need to get this out now. There's really valuable content in here. It's free. Everybody needs that. Because I guess where our mind went was, okay, everything's closed, but they're going to reopen at some point, and we know that's going to be different to what they've closed like. So what can they do within that period? Are there things that they can do to improve, their user journeys during that time that they're closed? Are there things that they can put into place where, I don't know, just things that you could do to improve your website, improving the website speed, for example, making sure that there's no barriers to along that booking journey, just tidying up stuff and getting everything ready. Because when you do open, you're probably going to be at a capped capacity, and you're going to get to that capacity really quickly because there's going to be pent up demand. And so, we just tried to focus on all the things that we could do that would help during that time. And then I started to write blog posts about what people could potentially be, what potentially people would be opening and what that would look like. And timed tickets was one of those things. And very much I was learning from attractions in America that were closing, or attractions elsewhere around the world that were starting to reopen, and how they were reopening. I mean, subscribe to Blue Loop, which is a brilliant website. I'm sure you guys know of it. And so the content that I was receiving from them was showcasing what other attractions were doing around the world. And I just thought, well, okay, well this is coming for us, isn't it? So surely if that's what's happening there, this is what's going to come. So I guess we just tried to focus on helping our clients understand what they would need to do. But, there's only so much forward planning you can do. And at the end of the day, it all kind of came at once anyway. So we were still crazy busy having done all of the planning regardless.
Kelly, I really appreciate what you said there about just trying to figure out what you could do to help your clients. Because I know there were days that because I do leadership training and I support the attractions industry for the most part over here in North America. And of course, all the attractions here shut down. So they weren't doing any kind of training. And I remember days that I was just staring at my computer, staring at my walls saying, what do I do? And that almost that exact same thought came to my mind, like, what do I do to help? And I know that's what, Josh and I started doing a video series for COVID-19, and we started doing all these different things. And, I think that there's this desire and want to help, but we don't always know what exactly that looks like. So sometimes it's just throwing some rubber cheese against the wall, right? Just to see what happens. But I think that's just that it's a great way to show your clients that obviously you're still there and you provided all this information for free. But I'm also curious because you do the podcast and we want to get into that as well. But how important is it, and I guess this gets into the realm of content marketing, to do things like the ebook, to do things like the podcast, to not only be there as a paid resource, but also just a helpful resource? How important do you think that is for a business here in 2020?
I think it's hugely important because I think it's a really generous thing to give things away for free. But I think actually it's a way of building trust. And so for us, it's hugely important. We want to be seen as people that care about our clients. And I think that's one of the ways of doing that is to say, well, look, we know all about all of this stuff. There's stuff we can help you with. Have it, have some of our knowledge and see what happens. And you reap the rewards of that at some point, and it might be years from now that we speak to people that have downloaded our ebook, for example, over that time. But, if it's been useful and it's been helpful to them and it's got them out of a sticky bind at some point, brilliant. That's all that matters, isn't it, right now? There's no expectation. I guess we understand that, attractions industry in the UK is really struggling still. Things aren't back to normal. I don't know what normal is going to be anymore. And I don't know how long it's going to take to even think about what that might look like. So we'll carry on doing that. We'll carry on being as helpful as we can. And I think that's partly why the podcast continues as well. And what I wanted to do with Skip the Queue is really focus on having brilliant people, having great conversations with brilliant people that is positive in some way. Everybody, we're all in this together. It is a really difficult time, but I also didn't kind of want to ram that down everyone's throats. That it's really challenging. There are some really positive things that are coming out of what's happened, and I wanted to speak to people that were willing to share the kind of, look, this is what's happened, but this is what we're doing. And it just feels like a good thing to be doing right now to kind of raise everyone's spirits a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And, I think we feel the same way. And that's kind of been what has driven a lot of the content that, that we've done as well. We did our, lessons from Executives Ebook, which was, a combination of, positive inspiration as well as kind of a lot of very real world, this is what we're dealing with. So obviously not, of course, not shying away from all the, struggle everyone's been dealing with it, but as far as what's been able to come out from that. So we mentioned the ebook a few times, and we'll be sure to include the link to it in the show notes for those to download. And
I have to say it's got a little bit of an unfortunate name at the moment. So we did start this before, prior to COVID, and it is called Double Your Visitor Numbers, which,
right.
Look, we know you might not be able to do that right now with the capped capacity, but there's still lots of very valuable content in there.
So it is, I believe, 91 pages long, and I downloaded it the other day. And We're not going to go through it page by page and look
No, we're
at
not. We're not
everything
doing
from
that
it.
today.
But if you can give us like a quick high level, what are some of the overarching lessons that come out of it in terms of doubling your visitor number, even if it's not something that attractions can necessarily do today, they can still potentially double the demand or be able to manage capacity over a longer period of time, or even be in a position to add on, ancillary purchases if they are hitting capacity and being able to, incorporate it with their revenue strategy, even if it's not necessarily attendance times two.
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head there, Josh. So there are hundreds of digital strategies in the ebook, and a lot of them focus on UX. So simple things that you can do, small changes that you can make that will all add up and start to make a big difference. There's things like digital gifting, how to upsell. So, at the moment, we do talk as a company, we talk a lot about doubling visitor numbers, and it's something that we've always been kind of really focused on, more visitors, but actually, we can't do that at the moment. So there's things in there that talk about kind of cross-selling and upselling. So how to make the most of the visitors that are coming. If they're coming, it means they love your venue, they want to spend money there. So how do you make the most of that? What other incentives? How can you make that experience better for them and gain through it as well? But there's things around how to create compelling content, how to create user-generated content like our competition. It covers a really broad spectrum of things, but they're all strategies that can be implemented quite quickly and quite simply. And we felt that was what was really important for the ebook. It's you don't need to hire a new agency to do a lot of the things that are in these ebooks. They could be done with your existing marketing team. And right now, those marketing teams might be depleted. You've still got people on furlough. So, very, very simple things that you can start to put in place that will just, those marginal gains, it will get you another % higher, another % higher, another % higher.
Yeah, I think that's great, because in some of the places that I've been talking to, they are, I guess, stuck in, this is what we've always done and now we can't do it, right? So it's good to have those little pushes, so they can have this little new idea that can just, be simple to implement, but can give them some big gains. I think that's great. So yeah, like Josh said, we'll put put that link in the show notes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Another link we'll put in the show notes is to your podcast, Skip the Queue. So I definitely want to talk about that from one podcast, or I guess Josh and I are two podcast co-hosts to another podcast co-host. So what was the feeling about why you wanted to start specifically a podcast? And I'd love to hear from your perspective too. What are some of the lessons you've learned about doing a podcast?
Oh, so many lessons. I have to say, I love doing the podcast, but it's because I love meeting new people. I really get a buzz out of meeting really interesting new people. And I've been so blown away by the people that have said that will come on the podcast. It's been just so heartwarming. Why did we do the podcast? I think for us, genuinely, we wanted to learn more about the industry. So we've been working in the sector probably for about 4 years. Yeah, it's about 4 or 5, coming up to 5 years now. So relatively new in the sector. And I guess we started the podcast last year because we wanted to kind of understand about all the different facets within that sector. So we very much kind of work with marketing departments, and because of what we do and how we work with our clients, we speak a lot with front of house about what their challenges are in terms of, what they need from a digital perspective. And we wanted to learn more about anyone and everyone. So now we're talking to people that have been, VPs of Disney. I had Lee Cockrell on the podcast. He was, it's fascinating. What an incredible leader. Absolutely fascinating to talk to him about things. But then we speak to people who are a little bit like us, who are kind of associates to the industry as well. So we had Marge Ainsley on, who runs Museum Freelance. So she runs an organisation that helps other freelancers in the museum sector. And, you know, it's fascinating to find out what she does as a freelancer, why she set up the organisation, how much support they give. And so, you know, number one reason for doing it was really just to learn as much as we possibly can. Number two reason also is to highlight other people in the sector. You know, we're really big believers in raising people up. I'm a big fan of, you know, I've always had this really strong belief that if you help others, then good things come back to you. And so for us, it's really important that we are kind of showcasing what other people do. And eventually some of that good stuff will come back on us. Third reason is because then we get to work with these great people, right? You know, and I don't necessarily mean as clients, I mean as collaborators. So, you know, there's some people that I know that have come on the podcast that we'll definitely work with, and we're kind of passing leads and things like that back to each other as well. So you know, you expand your network, and you've got more people that you can talk about and more people that are talking about you as well. So yeah, that threefold really. And I guess it's done some really great things in terms of sort of raising our profile a little bit in the industry, and I probably a little bit quicker than I expected it to as well, you know. And I think that's really just because I've been a bit bolshy and asked a few people if they'll come on the podcast that I wasn't expecting to say yes. But it's happened, you know, and people have been generous with their time. So yeah, that's why we did the podcast really, and I'm so glad that we started it. Well, look, if I hadn't done the podcast, I wouldn't be here speaking to you two.
Right. That's true. That's how we found out about you. So
That's right.
So going back to that first reason, and to learn about a lot of things going on in the industry that maybe your clients are facing, and, you know, just overall trying to learn more about the industry, is there anything that, you know, has come up on the podcast from any of your guests, maybe that was surprising or counterintuitive to what you may have thought or what you may have believed, or maybe, you know, you ended the interview and kind of went back to your team and said, I've got this great piece of information that we hadn't considered before, and now maybe we can implement this into how we serve and how we add value to our clients. Anything, kind of any, you know, sparks of inspiration from there?
Yeah, I think there's been a few conversations where I've been like, yes, of course, this is exactly what we should be doing. I think there's been a couple that recently that have really, I guess, opened my eyes a little bit, because we're not in that, we're not in the role that they do. So we've just, and actually this podcast will go out next week. So we just interviewed Rachel McKay and Carlton Gadjadar. And Rachel speaks very much about crisis management. So she works for the Palaces at Kew Garden. She's been on furlough the whole way through, but she's also been doing her MA, and she did it on crisis management. I mean, is there ever a better time to be learning about crisis management? And the conversations that we had, and the things that she was explaining to me about how to react, and things that front of house needed to think about in terms of crisis management, was really eye-opening. She actually has a blog out called the Recovery Blog, where she's been putting out free content for front of house about how you get your front of house team back safely, because I think that's something that we hadn't considered. You know, we're very much focused on getting our clients open and how they do that, and what we give them digitally to be able to do that. But we hadn't really thought of it from the perspective of, well, actually, do front of house want to come back? Do they feel safe to come back? How are they going to deal with certain situations that might come up if people come in and they haven't got a mask on? How, you know, and it was all those kind of things that I thought, gosh, I hadn't even considered those things. And I guess, because a lot of the time when we're working with clients, we do have to consider, although we're working in digital, we have to consider very kind of offline human challenges. And so that understanding definitely kind of enriches what we then need to understand from a digital perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And Josh and I talk about the sort of the analog side, right? Because we're always talking about people, right? And your perspective is very much the digital side, and how do you communicate things that way? So I'm curious from a communication standpoint, whether it's a guest or even a team member that might be looking at the website that you've built. What are some of those ways that you communicate some of those messages? Because again, like Josh said in the very beginning, website technology has really changed a lot. So are you finding, pictures, videos, text, combination of all of those? Like what's the best strategy to get those messages out there in the way that the attraction needs them to get out there?
Well, I think video is really key, especially at the moment. It's such a simple way of explaining how to do something, because you show somebody how to do it. They learn quicker than telling someone how to do it. And that's been really fun, actually, because a lot of the attractions that have been opening up have been doing kind of welcome back videos, and this is what it's going to be like. And it's just such an engaging way of showing what that experience is going to be like. And I guess in many ways it starts to put the customer's mind at rest that, okay, it's not going to be the same as it was when we went back, but actually this doesn't look scary. This still looks fun. There's still a fun experience to be had. And video is absolutely the best way to capture that and to showcase what that's going to be like. And we've seen, a lot of clients have been doing those. There's been some really fun ones that have come out that have really made us laugh. There's a couple, I can't remember that, but there's a couple that I'll send to you that are really brilliant. And actually they're from really small kind of museums that have done something like kind of really quirky, and then that's blown up. And again, it's content. So, it's content that then can go viral, and it spreads across your social media channels and gains more followers. I don't know if you saw, I'm just thinking about things like this that have happened during lockdown, but there was the National Cowboy Museum. Did it? Oh my God, it was the best, right? Cowboy Tim? Oh, brilliant. I mean, for anyone who's listening, so the National Cowboy Museum was taken over, the Twitter account was taken over by their security guard, head of security.
Oh, I think I saw this.
It was great. Do you know what? It was just brilliant content though, because it was so genuine. It was so genuine. He took over the Twitter feed, and he was kind of in the museum on his own and just, talking through what he was doing that day and the exhibits and stuff. It was great. And I'm sure that's gained them a whole load more followers. And I'm sure that's gained them a whole load more visitors now they're open as well.
Go ahead, Josh.
I was going to say, I think the important thing to keep in mind here is that if you're, looking at marketing from the standpoint of we're in this pandemic and no one really knows what to do, especially back in like March, April, and everyone was like, well, should we keep marketing? And, all the articles and the, comments I saw were yes, because you want to maintain relevance, you want to maintain awareness, because obviously there's a difference between intent to visit and the visit itself. There's that lead time. So it's about being able to reinforce that. So by the time you do open, you're not starting that lead time from the day you open your doors. You're starting it, while you're still closed. And then it doesn't take a huge team, campaign, or budget to be able to do things like this with Cowboy Tim walking around the museum. I live here in Chicago, and the Field Museum and Shed Aquarium both just went nuts with what they did. So the Field Museum is known for Sue, the T-Rex, which is an acronym that I can't remember what exactly it stands for. I think it's a very long scientific name, so they call the dinosaur Sue. And then there's these like goofy like T-Rex costumes, like just rubber and like flailing all around. So now Sue actually has a character running around the museum, going to Shed and visiting the penguins.
Amazing.
The penguins are over at Field Museum. They're right next to each other, so they're able to do that. And it all kind of comes into play of like I said, kind of having that awareness and that creativity from that strategy.
Yeah,
right.
I love those examples. I love those examples so much. But it's like you say, it's inexpensive, but it's a brilliant way to keep your audience engaged, even if they can't visit the venue. They're still engaged with the venue. You're still kind of keeping them. You're keeping that excitement of when they can next come back in the air.
Right. Right. I had a question tied in there somewhere, but I got so excited talking about Stu and the Penguins that I forgot it. So I'll bring it back up if it comes back up. But one thing we're curious about too is how Rubber Cheese helped achieve a 316% increase in tour bookings and product sales within 3 months for a distillery visitor center. You mentioned that, distillery tours, earlier on in the interview, and said it's not exactly a theme park, so it's kind of like an attraction. And I think it absolutely is like a visitor attraction you're going to experience, and hopefully it's a product that maybe is being consumed at home sometimes, and there's obviously the retail component of it. And so tell us how you increase those tour bookings.
Yeah, so we've worked with this organisation for a number of years now, and it's a fabulous centre. They had a really dated website, and the website was really it was really a very poor user experience on mobile. So booking tickets was really challenging, and actually being able to book a ticket and purchase a bottle or purchase merchandise at the same time was impossible with the system that they had. So if you wanted to visit, you would go through a transaction and you would book a ticket to visit. But then if you also wanted to buy some merchandise at the same time, you would then have to do a second transaction. And so people didn't, basically. So they might buy a ticket, but they wouldn't buy the merchandise, or they might buy the merchandise, but then not bother going back and buying the ticket. So you're instantly losing like maybe 50% of your sales already. And so we worked with them, did a huge round of kind of research, user research, front of house research, understanding what the challenges were. The site itself wasn't very explanatory in terms of what the experience was going to be like when you got there. So they used to get quite a lot of walk up. We'll walk up on the day and we'll go because we're in the area, but they didn't get that many pre-booking sales because no one really kind of understood what they were going to get. And it was a bit difficult to find out on the website, what was included or where it was even. And so they would get a lot of phone calls. So we built them a whole new system. So we built them a bespoke ticket booking system, which you could buy tickets and merchandise in the same transaction. So instantly their sales went up, but you could also buy gift certificates as well. So you could buy a tour and you could gift it to somebody. So you could gift it digitally, or you could, you could buy a gift voucher as well. So again, you're just increasing that consumer purchasing power all the time. Made the website, it looks brilliant. I'll send you the link to it.
Made it much easier. Show notes.
Thank you. Yeah. So this is Plymouth Gin Distillery down in the UK. And made it much easier for people to find out what they wanted. So then the customer support calls went down. So front of house were much happier. And they're the kind of projects that we really like, because you're giving someone a digital solution that's solving their challenge, but it's also making people's experience, not just the people that are visiting better, but it's making the people's experience that work there better as well. So that was how we did that. It's a great project, and it's a really great venue. If you're ever over in the UK, you should go.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of places in the UK. I haven't been over to that part of the world, but a lot of places that I need to visit, and that would be one of them. And what I love about that is that there was probably a point with that organization where they're like, our website's fine, everything's good, but they didn't really see what that investment would ultimately return for them, right? And that's always kind of that trick of, well, we're doing okay now, but we don't want to spend the money sometimes to make it even greater. Right. So that can be a challenge too, I would imagine, that you run into.
Yeah, it definitely can be a challenge. I would say it probably wasn't a challenge with that organization, just because they are super switched on and they knew that they needed to get better, and they're a brilliant organization. They're very, very focused on digital. It's just the system they had in place just wasn't working for them. Sure. But we do get that quite a lot where look, you can put a website together at home if you want, and you can find something off the shelf that will do your tickets for you, but it's never going to give the greatest customer experience because it hasn't been tailored to them. So you're just giving them a way of buying a ticket. You're not really thinking about how they feel, or you're not thinking about the emotions that are involved in terms of how they feel about your brand. we always say that the fun starts from the first click, because as far as we're concerned, that's when the experience of coming to that venue starts. It's when you start to look at the site and you buy the ticket. And that ticket buying process should be seamless. A good friend of mine who was on the podcast, Carly Strawn, she's a ticket and operations specialist. Brilliant. My dog. She and I completely agree with her on this. She says you shouldn't even remember that you've bought a ticket. That process of purchasing should be so smooth that you've kind of forgotten, and you've forgotten how much it costs because it was so easy to do. And that's exactly what it should be like. But yeah, there are challenges in terms of how you not convince, but it's difficult to persuade people to invest in something like that is very bespoke and very tailored sometimes.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. No, I love that mindset of the fun starts from the first click. And, a lot of, what I focus on has to do with guest experience, which for the most part usually is what happens on site, but it's very much an extension of that to, prior to the visit and even after the visit, and that the web and the digital component needs to be all integrated with what the guest experience is. And then tie in what Matt focused on with employee experience. You mentioned the amount of phone calls that, were reduced just asking questions, leading to higher employee satisfaction, then leading to that higher guest satisfaction on site, and hopefully more purchases, and kind of extending the offsite. That it's all interwoven, really all very much together, all very cohesive.
Absolutely.
The other example, or the other scenario we wanted to ask you about, was how you saved one visitor attraction over 972 staff hours each year.
Oh, this is my favorite project. This was, and again, it's one of those projects that there was a real human challenge that we solved with a digital solution. And so this was for Eureka, the National Children's Museum, who I've mentioned previously. It's a brilliant venue. And so although it's called a museum, it's actually their whole ethos is learning through play. So everything that's in this museum is hands-on, it's touchable, it's playable. They've got an area that's all about learning about your body, and they've got a giant nose, and you can put your head up the nose and see what's up there, and then it blows it, and it's brilliant. It's really, really fun. And they're really, really busy. So it's a great place to go. It's in Halifax in the UK. So it's up north. And the weather is not always brilliant up north, so it can be a bit wet. So in an October half term, which is always their busiest time, there used to be quite a big queue to get in. So this was before the pre-booking, and we did their website. So they used to have quite a large queue. So essentially, you'd go along, you might queue for 40 minutes to get into the venue, and you'd buy your ticket. Then if you buy a ticket to Eureka, you can convert that ticket for the day into an annual pass for no extra cost. So it's a really great value. So say you pay £10 for that ticket, that's £10 for the whole year. I'm sure it's more than £10, but for an example. So brilliant. So you're not going to turn them down on that offer, are you? So what would happen is you'd buy your ticket, you'd say, yes, I want to do that. And then they'd say, great, you have to go to that queue now. And that queue might be another half an hour. So you can see how it was a bit annoying for the customers, not great for front of house. And that process was a manual process as well. So front of house would have to write out, a ticket on a card and then give you that card. So there was, it's time consuming for everybody. And so part of the process when we actually won the project to work with Eureka was, look, we need a new website. This is the challenge, but actually we've got this problem as well. Is this something that we can solve? And so we built a digital annual pass solution. So now what happens is less queues, because people can book their tickets in advance. They turn up, they get given a receipt, and they say, if you take that receipt home and log on to the website that's on there, then you can convert that into an annual pass. Great. And then they go in. So, the onus is on the customer to do the conversion at home. It saved front of house all of those hours. So it saved them time, it saved them money, but it made the experience, 100 times better for the consumer and for the people that work there as well. it's great. It's such a great project. Like it makes me smile every time I think about it, because I think it was such a simple thing to do, and they really thought it out well. You know, they took action and they did something about it, and it's made a huge difference to all of those people involved in it. It's brilliant.
That's wonderful. Then I'll steal your word. Sounds brilliant, right? You know, to think of it that way. And I know that so many places here in the States specifically are looking for ways to, you know, reduce hours and, you know, make things a little bit more digital and things like that. So I think that's great inspiration to hear that you know, that kind of thing is out there for people if they haven't looked for those kind of things yet. But I'm also curious from a, you know, kind of marrying, I guess, what Josh does, what I do, and what you do, you know, because ultimately it is about the end user experience and thinking about how, you know, somebody goes on and the experience starts with the first click, right? And then they go to the venue, and how important is it for that venue experience from when they're interacting with people to be just as user-friendly as the digital experience?
Oh yeah, massively. I mean, it's part of your brand, isn't it? The experience that you're showcasing when someone uses your website, it's all part of how they perceive the experience to be at the venue as well. So it has to marry up. And however you do that, I mean, I know that Eureka now, if they do get incredibly busy at times, and I know that they go down with iPads and they help book people in if they haven't booked in advance, so then they can get in quicker. So it's about marrying up, you know, are there things that we can do that are digital but actually offline that are going to help people in that sense. But I mean, it's massively important, isn't it? You know, that to have the same experience online and offline is absolutely everything.
Yeah. So Kelly, as we start to wind down this interview here, we want to steal another component from your podcast, if you don't mind. And we want to know, what has been your most influential book that has helped your career, or one that you would love to recommend to our audience?
Yes, I wrote this down so I wouldn't forget, because it's such, I mean, I didn't need to write the name of it down, but it's a brilliant book. So when I started my business, I was 24, and somebody said to me, "You really need to get out and network." And I was like, "Oh, okay. What's that then? What's networking?" And they said, "Well, you kind of need to go into meetings and meet a load of people that you don't know." And I thought, well, that sounds terrifying, doesn't it? Like, the concept of that sounds horrendous. Are they all just going to give me work? I mean, why are we doing this? And somebody recommended that I read Dale Carnegie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Okay. And it is the book that I always recommend, because if I'm completely honest, it probably just changed my whole mindset on how to meet people and how to talk to people, but actually how to listen to people, because that's what the book's about. It's about understanding how to listen to people and what they're saying, and how to have great conversations, and how to really care about the things that people are saying to you. And it's genuinely the book that I think has made the biggest difference in my career, because I read it so early on. And I honestly, networking, I'd never been to a networking event in my whole life. I was great at going out clubbing and meeting my friends and going out for dinner and doing all the fun stuff. But, you know, I was like, oh gosh, actually having to go to a breakfast meeting and meet all these people over breakfast, I just had no idea. And so that book really taught me how to build relationships. And relationship building has been the absolute key of all of our kind of sales in our business. You know, so much of our business comes through word of mouth and referrals. So much of our business comes through people that are in our network, but so much of our business comes from meeting brilliant new people, and, you know, people like you guys that you have really great conversations with. And that book taught me how to do that. I hope you both read it. You should read it if you haven't read it.
I did.
Yes, absolutely.
I love that book, and I felt the exact same way. And I think I also read it when I was around 24 or so. And I remember, like, the complete paradigm shift, or you said, you know, how to listen, you know, and just, do you make better relationships when you do more talking, or when you do more listening, and, you know, having it be more from the listening end and asking questions? from that. So no, we really appreciate that. And not only that, but we would love to give away a copy of that as well.
Yay.
I guess we'll just do this the same way you do it. If you enjoyed this interview with Kelly, just tweet to Attraction Pros. Make sure you tag us. Feel free to tag Skip the Q in it. And what is it that you said, Kelly? Would it be I Want Kelly's Book?
I want Kelly's book. Yeah.
All right. On Twitter, we'll select someone and we'll send you How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. So Kelly, thank you so much. As we wrap this up, if people want to learn more about Rubber Cheese, if they want to get a hold of you directly, where would you send them?
You can go to our website, which is rubbercheese.com. I'm on LinkedIn, so you can search for me, Kelly Molson, on LinkedIn, and I am also on Twitter, and I'm the Chief Cheese on Twitter.
That's awesome.
Of course I am.
Of course. Not the big cheese, the Chief Cheese.
The Chief Cheese, yeah. I think the big cheese was taken. Damn.
That's great. That's great. Well, Kelly, this has been a fascinating conversation. We really appreciate your time. And so thank you very much for spending the time and being able to come on with us today. And for everybody out there listening and watching, just remember, we are all Attraction Pros.
Wow.
Thanks for listening to the Attraction Pros podcast.
Make sure to subscribe so you can tune in when new episodes release. And even better, please leave us a review on iTunes.
For more information, visit AttractionPros.com.